Up ahead, an IRS whistleblower claims that the agency was thwarted from fully investigating Hunter Biden and Joe. AG Merrick Garland says he didn't interfere, but the U.S. attorney in charge of the case hasn't responded since the claims were made public. Will we ever get a definitive answer? Up ahead, 2 IRS whistleblowers claim Hunter Biden deserved more serious charges than he pled guilty to, but that the probe was hamstrung to protect the president. Hunter's lawyer says the whistleblowers are disgruntled agents with, quote, bias and an axe to grind. So which is it? Can all 3 be telling the truth? Hunter Biden's prosecution and plea deal on tax evasion remains a hot-button issue as 2024's election heats up, partly because it's unclear whether the IRS was thwarted from fully investigating the Bidens, including Joe. What do those involved in the case say? Well, here's Exhibit A. IRS whistleblower Gary Shapley, who oversaw the agency's role in the investigation, is claiming that the IRS investigators recommended far more serious charges and that the U.S. attorney in Delaware overseeing the probe, David Weiss, was blocked from bringing charges in other states. And Shapley says his criticism of the Justice Department's handling of the case led to him being denied a promotion. Here's what he told Bret Baier on Fox News.
We were conducting an investigation of Hunter Biden, and we were trying to follow the normal process. We were trying to get to the bottom of it, and ultimately, if it was going to lead to another individual, we should follow that to determine what is actually happening. But there were definitely hindrances that I've never seen before in my 14 years concerning this investigation that didn't allow us to follow through on investigation of any other individual, to include President Biden.
But how does that square with Exhibit B? When asked about the case, AG Merrick Garland said this.
Mr. Weiss, who was appointed by President Trump as the U.S. Attorney in Delaware and assigned this matter during the previous administration, would be permitted to continue his investigation and to make a decision to prosecute any way in which he wanted to and in any district in which he wanted to. Mr. Weiss has since sent a letter to the House Judiciary Committee confirming that he had that authority. I don't know how it would be possible for anybody to block him from bringing a prosecution, given that he has this authority.
Which leads us to Exhibit C, the letter that Garland referenced. U.S. Attorney Weiss wrote this to House Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan back on June 7, and it included this. I have been granted ultimate authority over this matter, including responsibility for deciding where, when, and whether to file charges and for making decisions necessary to preserve the integrity of the prosecution consistent with federal law, the principles of federal prosecution, and departmental regulations. But according to Shapley's testimony, in mid-2022, Weiss reached out to the top federal prosecutor in Washington to ask his office to pursue charges and was rebuffed, as was a similar request to prosecutors in the Central District of California. And much hubbub has been made over the reporting from the New York Times piece, quote, a second former IRS official who has not been identified told House Republicans that same story. That episode was confirmed independently to the New York Times by a person with knowledge of the situation. On Friday, Hunter Biden's lawyer, Abby Lowell, pushed back in a letter to Jason Smith, the GOP chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, who'd released the whistleblower transcripts. Lowell called them, quote, disgruntled agents with a bias and an axe to grind, and accusing Republican lawmakers of releasing the transcripts as, quote, an obvious ploy to feed the misinformation campaign to harm our client, Hunter Biden, as a vehicle to attack his father. So what actually happened here? Joining me now to discuss is Glenn Thrush, Washington correspondent for the New York Times, where he covers the Department of Justice. Glenn, thank you for being here. It's your New York Times reporting that I referenced a moment ago. Can all of these competing accounts somehow be squared?
Who knows? But I think one of the things that's becoming increasingly clear is Merrick Garland did not do a very good job of explaining the process to us when he addressed us on Friday. This is a much more nuanced process than Weiss having completely unlimited authority to move unilaterally. The process would entail, say he goes to DC and California and says to them, let's partner on prosecutions involving violations of the tax code. And what we're really talking about here, according to the material that's out there, is the 14 2014 and 2015 tax years seem to be the ones that they were targeting, right? They then say, nah, we don't like it, or for whatever reasons that they choose to decline to partner, he can then go appeal essentially to Merrick Garland and say, I want to invoke a section of the law called the special, not special counsel, special attorney, whereby you overrule these guys and give them full authority. Weiss says he never did that. Garland says he never did that. So part of this is hinging on how incomplete an explanation Garland provided to us when we asked him that question.
Okay, so in my hand, I've got my own marked up version of the print edition of the New York Times, which contains infamous paragraph number 21. Quote, that episode was confirmed independently to the New York Times by a person with knowledge of the situation. What exactly did you confirm?
We confirmed, I'm not going to go much beyond what we wrote, but I will tell you that the general sense that we have is that he approached the prosecutor in Southern California with a request to partner and was denied. That is the alpha to omega of what we know and what we have reported thus far. We're continuing to report.
Okay, that seems to support what Shapley has said, which is that at this meeting on October 7, 2022, Weiss comes in and says, look, I'm not the decision maker here.
It doesn't support that at all. It supports this one fairly narrow aspect of the story. Look, the main thing with Shapley is what we are seeing, and obviously there is new information that's been presented in this testimony that has changed the narrative of the story, right? We are now talking about the DC and California charging decisions. We hadn't been talking about that before. So let's just affirm that he has placed that into the record. But a lot of these other characterizations, Michael, have not been challenged. We're not seeing him cross-examined by minority counsel in this testimony. And he has yet to say that he will appear under oath before the committee as Merrick Garland has. So the suggestions, the question here is there are two sets of questions here, right? What's the fact set, and which is what we're attempting to determine, and what are the suggestions that Shapley is making, and what are the gaps and consonances between those two accounts?
Glenn, the person who could clear this up more than anyone else, it seems to me, is U.S. Attorney Weiss. First of all, do you agree with that? And secondly, do you expect he will soon speak?
I do. I think Weiss, from our reporting, Weiss is particularly frustrated with Shapley's characterization of himself as a whistleblower. He doesn't think there's been any retaliation against Shapley. And what we're sort of hearing from scuttlebutt inside the department is that Weiss is frustrated by the version of accounts that are going out there. Now, that said, there was one line in the announcement of the Hunter Biden plea deal that sort of freezes everything. He said that this is, quote unquote, an ongoing investigation, end quote, which took a lot of people by surprise. But what it does is it means that he, Weiss, cannot be dragged before any congressional committee and forced to answer these questions under oath while this is going on.
I know I'm dreaming, but I want to see, Shapley, Weiss, and Garland, all like this and clearing this up once and for all. Thank you so much, Glenn Thrush. We'll continue to read your reporting on this.
Great talking to you.
More social media reaction. I think this comes from the live website chat that we just initiated, which had so much traffic that it crashed. Hopefully it's coming back. Big fan, but where were you in the beginning of the Hunter story? You discounted it, but now that other media has acknowledged you're on the program. No, that's, Kelly, that's not fair at all. And those who listen to me in my day job on Sirius XM know that from the get-go, I talked about it extensively, didn't believe that the way the story was squelched from the New York Post and in social media should have been the case. It may have been the 11th hour of the campaign, but I thought it warranted then a full airing and conversation. So there you go. And now you can say, oh, he loves Trump. But I'm also the guy who said that at its core, it's an addiction story. Don't think that it's a corruption story. Hunter's got issues. I don't see the evidence that Joe does. But it's an addiction story. I'd love to talk more about it, believe me. Why don't you listen to me on radio? I get 3 hours a day.